actually a bit chilled, cold-ish. I hope you guys aren't freezing out there. But to start off this talk, it's basically around exploring conversational AI with basically crafting AI-powered Django apps with Gemini. Just for context, I'm sure if someone here has built something like this prior to this. I'm curious, has anyone built something similar, or someone is building Django apps? I would actually want to assume most of us build Django apps. It's one of the Python web frameworks. But maybe not to waste so much time, I think we shall just move forward. So for starters, when we're thinking about this talk, one of the major things that came to my mind was conversational AI. Why conversational AI? Lately we've seen a couple of applications moving to this. We've seen a surge and a lot of apps introducing chatbots. A bunch of these adding more of that conversational feel to them. And for me, it's mind-blowing that even for e-commerce applications, you can actually achieve such a feel. Lately, I was just buying something online, and this was more like a checkout process. I actually hadn't thought of a situation where you could actually have more of a conversational feel to a checkout process. Traditionally, we would basically have a form, fill out your card details if you're using maybe Visa, or if you're choosing to use MasterCard or whichever provider, and that's something that you'd be able to use. But having a conversational feel, to me it rhymes better with a user, and that's why today we are here to talk about conversational AI and basically to see how we can be able to put this together in a Django application. So maybe to break down and have a feel into what conversational AI could be. So can I say, without having this very technical or something like that, I would say conversational AI is basically a way for you to be able to interact with software. The software could be a robot, or it could be a chatbot somewhere or something like that. And under the hood, this software will be using natural language processing to basically come up and understand what you're saying, try to process it, and be able to respond to you in a natural feel that rhymes easier with you, something more human. So why Django? When we're starting, we talked about Django apps and stuff like that. Personally, been using Django for a while, and the reason why I do love Django is because of it being robust. Django offers a couple of tools. With Django, you're going to have so many things out of the box. A friend of mine loves to call it to refer to it with batteries included, like a bunch of things included that you can basically just plug into and work with. And the other thing I really love about Django is the structure and the architecture. One of the software engineering principles. Oh, by the way, I do have a civil engineering background, but transitioned to computer science. And over the years, one of the principles in building software that I've gotten to love, and one of those that helps me a couple of times, is keeping things that will change together so that they can live together in whichever setup of your project. And that's something I felt Django works with out of the box. That when you're working with Django, you'll have to set up apps, and those different apps are basically domain specific. That means if you're maybe having a functionality maybe around orders in your application, all your orders will be together. The models, someone might want to call them schemas, they'll also live in there. The views with the logic, with the business logic, will also be in there, and also the URLs. So that kind of organization, I feel it enables things that will change together to live together. Yeah, I don't want to take credit for that, but one of the other things is security. Out of the box, Django enables you to achieve that easily. Scalability, you can always just plug in a new app and be able to scale your application, and so many more amazing features. Some of those I really love. When Django released Django 5, I think late last year, around November, December. They did have a bunch of features that you might want to check out, and they're really interesting if you've maybe been using Django in the past, and you might want to check out some of those. They might really help you so much. But the other thing is why Gemini. Gemini basically enables you to have that kind of feel where it can be able to recognize what you're maybe trying to what you're maybe trying to say. Also customizable models. Gemini is always working around to have models that work better for you. I think currently it's Flash 1B, that's the latest. Previously people have been using Flash for the bigger part. And it's also backed by Google, among other reasons. So that means to some extent you're guaranteed that you'll have some kind of support, a big community. That's something they are well known for. But then putting this together, why Django and Gemini for conversational AI? Having looked at some of those pros out of the box, Django is basically, in whatever we're going to explore today, Django is basically going to handle for us the web interfaces and all that routing, all that web-related stuff. And then we want to plug into Gemini as a large language model to basically enable us have that logical and that thoughtful response that you might want from whatever prompt you might come through with. But then, we've been talking about conversational AI, and, you've basically been using some of these apps. Those are some of those that I could just think about. But you've been using so many social media apps and, things of that kind. And you might have noticed one thing in common, which is that chat kind of feel, that conversational approach. And, you might be asking yourself, why is it that these days everyone building an app or something like that, or if you already had a legacy app or your app is already in production, why are you considering adding a chatbot? Why are you considering enabling people to ask questions and get back kind of responses in that line? Well, I might put it in my own way, but this is one of those that I personally rhymed well with. It was by Rauch, and he's the CEO of Vercel. If you use Next.js, you might know about him. But he puts it in a way that the transition from search to AI-powered chatbots might end up having to do less with the AI part and more with the chat, since it's more relatable. With the fact that chat is the more relatable user interface, especially for younger generations. I mean, if any of us here wanted to achieve something online, you might want to agree with me. You're also allowed to disagree. But if you do agree with me, having a chat interface, having a chat kind of experience makes it so much easier. It improves the user experience while you're using this. So, and going ahead to give some examples, so many people use WhatsApp, you use Facebook, you're using Snapchat, and whichever other social media. You're basically every day you're chatting with someone. So imagine building whichever app and giving someone a relatable kind of feel. It basically adds up so much. But then, before we get into building all this stuff, thinking about Gemini, thinking about Django, and everything that is very technical, before even getting into that very technical stuff, you might want to choose the best model. Gemini has a bunch of models, and oftentimes one of the things I personally consider is a use case that you might want to consider. Am I basically trying to achieve? Do I need a model that's more into vision? Do I need a model that's more optimized for text? Do I need a model for whichever use case you're welcome to name it? But that's one of the things you might want to consider. And also performance, basically still in that line. And also latency. Smaller models oftentimes give better performance for whichever use case you might want to have. And also data sensitivity. Are you working with very sensitive data that you don't want to share out there? And oftentimes if you see me somewhere talking about Firebase, there are a couple of things that you can as well achieve with that. Being able to train a model on your own data. something with GenKit. But I just did pull up this, just like how we've talked about use case, talked about sensitivity, privacy, and all that. I just pulled out this in its rawest format, so that you could maybe as well head to the DeepMind website and maybe check it out. But maybe an insight into basically what you might want to consider, so that as you choose your model, this is just an insight into that, but you can as well visit the website and be able to see so much more in that line. But then, we've been talking about conversational AI and, talking about Gemini, talking about Django, but then at the core of building these apps, you're basically not, the user won't want to know what you used to build it, yeah? So it's necessary for us to think about what's going to influence a great architecture for a conversational application, yeah? So that is something that I really found exciting, that before we even get into building anything like that, we might want to ask ourselves what enables someone to answer our question well, yeah? Thinking about that, if you did ask me what the weather is in Kenya today, answering that question might require me to have a certain kind of insight into it, yeah? For example, I might have to have some knowledge of that topic being asked. If you did ask me today about any topic I'm not very familiar with, or if you did ask me a topic I'm very familiar with, for example, Firebase, I'll basically have an easier, talking about Django and Gemini right now, then you did talk about something different, maybe Fast API or Flask. Basically, that's a different context. There is a relationship, they're all web frameworks, but then the context in this conversation today that we are having here today, it's basically about building Django apps with Gemini. So basically, as you're crafting your applications, as you're building your applications, as you're thinking about starting that application today, you might want to consider context. Considering context of the conversation is basically keeping a history of your previous chats. That if we're talking about something in a different chat, I shouldn't lose all the messages prior to that. I should have some way to store my history of the different conversations. Okay, so we've just looked at what enables someone to answer a question well, but then what also now builds up their response, yeah? Because these are basically, when you're thinking about building these conversational apps, I feel the best way is to have the human-centered design in there, putting yourself in the position of the user, trying to think about how will this software or this application be able to come up with a response that will rhyme better with the user. So one of the things thought about was understanding of the question, that if you do not understand the question really well, your response may not be as perfect to some extent. And someone here might want to agree with me on that. Interpretation of the question as well, the tone in which the question is asked. Oftentimes people get different questions differently based on how you do ask. You might ask the same question in a different tone and someone will understand something different. Someone else will also pick something different out of it. But then looking at asking ourselves about what makes up a good question, how does a good response come about, we might also now want to think about, as we get into the technical bit moving forward, we might now want to think about the architecture of building these conversational AI applications for efficiency. Building them for efficiency, we are basically looking at how can we serve whoever is going to use it in the best possible way. And on top of that, even us in the back end, how are we able to optimize a couple of things, things around privacy, safety, that we're not offending a certain kind of people, that, and you can name it. But this is one of those architectures just thought about, and one of those applied in the past before. When you are starting out this, you might want to think about the question, thinking about, and also what the response will be. So just as you can see there, you are going to require an interface somewhere. In this case, as we move forward, we shall be looking into we shall be templating the interfaces with Django as well. And our question will be passed to the server, and at the server side, we need to engineer our prompt. And our prompt basically might want to maybe give some context of the previous chat, getting a little into what we want to know moving forward, and we shall pass all that to Gemini, our prompt, our safety precautions, and all that stuff. And what we do expect back will be a Gemini response. And but for our query to the server as well, we shall also need to perform a knowledge search, basically also thinking about what is the kind of way we want to retrieve that kind of data, whatever. Oftentimes, lately, one of the approaches I really love is a vector search, basically to be able to use vectors and embeddings to retrieve more relatable results based on what someone provided. But then there are a couple of considerations to make as you're getting into this as well. Some of these considerations could be around the user interface. Oftentimes, you might want someone to have an intuitive interface, and one of the ways to achieve this lately is around streaming, that you want it to keep. I think you've used Gemini or any other application in that line. You see it typing in real time. Also, maybe knowledge search approach around that, and also prompt engineering, something you might want to take into consideration, as well as safety and privacy. But then thinking about prompt engineering a little deeper, basically, oftentimes when you're coming up with your prompts, you might want to also assign a temperature. If it's a bit low, you might have a better performance with your model, or also getting into what kind of knowledge you're working with. Do you want to give context of your previous conversation? For example, if you may be trying to ask a question about something, you might want to put the LLM in position of being a specialized agent in that particular domain. Chat context, setting guidelines for user responses and prompts, which might be also one of those challenges if you've lately been building applications around applications interacting with LLMs. You might want to also structure your response. Do you want the LLM to return the response in maybe just JSON? Do you want arrays? Do you want lists? Name it. So diving into the development, I'm thinking someone might have really been excited about this side, but there are a couple of prerequisites that you might want to have in place getting into the development of such applications. One of them being a basic understanding of Python, and a basic understanding of web development as well. Good to know Django. And basically you will also need a development environment. You might want to virtualize an environment somewhere and basically install Python. Might want a package manager, might want an IDE as well of your choice. So the very first step, you'll basically be setting up and installing Django and the Google Generative AI package as well. Then you'll be getting into creating the Django project. You'll be getting into creating a Django app, basically specifying what kind of app you want to set up in that line with a command, as you can see it right over there, python manage.py start app. And basically that will bootstrap for you the application in such a structure. You'll be able to see your chat app, then the chatbot in there with a couple of other files in. And basically you will also have to add your app that you've created. We did create chat app. We will need to add it to the project settings. That's you'll find that under the project you did create. Moving forward, in the chats models, you will as well need to set up. You will need to set up your model. This is a basic of that I did consider. So oftentimes you might want to know about your user or something like that. So we did add a user field, which will be a foreign key, and you'll also need a text input, a Gemini output, a date. Basically, this is to enable you to store the responses. Just like we talked about context earlier, you might want to know about what someone was interacting about prior to the current prompt. So that's one of the necessities of us storing this data somewhere. Then, since we've created a model, you might also want to migrate your database. And migrating your database, you'll basically make migrations, then migrate them. And yeah, the more interesting bit is around the views. Did create something right over here. And in this, you'll basically require an API key from Gemini. Oftentimes, these API keys are gotten from the Google AI Studio. So you will have to visit that. I did add some references to the slides in case you want to check out that. So you'll acquire your API key from the Google AI Studio and be able to pass that in right over there. As you can see, where we do have genai.configure. And beyond that, you will need a function somewhere to ask the question. We shall be making a post request to that. And basically, yeah. If you, I also did set up a repository somewhere. I'll be able to share that. So wrapping this up, the very last bit of it is basically around templating. And basically templating is where the user interfaces come through. And at that, you'll basically be setting up HTML templates. And yeah, that's what your user will be interacting with. I guess that's it. Thank you so much.